Welcome to the Hypothalamic Amenorrhea Podcast. I'm Danny Sheriff, your host, certified fertility awareness practitioner, functional nutrition counselor, and founder of the HA Society, and of course, an HA recovery coach who has walked where you currently are walking. This is the place to come if you care about getting your period regularly. This podcast aims to educate, inform, and keep you motivated on your period and HA recovery track. So let's dive in. But last thing, nothing on the show should be taken as medical advice, so please seek the advice of your physician. Hey, do you know what your blind spots are? As in, do you know what it is, what the thing is that is holding you back from getting your period back? Look, it could be an absolute plethora, cornucopia of things, but in our practice, the first place we tend to go is what behaviors and habits do you have around food that you may be still doing? And these are called blind spots because we just don't necessarily always know that they're an unhelpful habit, or that it's something that we're doing, whether it be a subconscious or conscious need to control our food or our body, or whether it be something that you've just done for so long that it feels normal and like a preference even. We have created a checklist. It's a 3-page checklist that goes through food types, behaviors around food, and mindsets around food. And what you do is you go through the lists and you check off and you see which ones are you doing, whether it be daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and how are they potentially affecting your recovery today. So it's a really simple checklist. It's just 3 pages. You go through it. There's a very simple scoring system to help you figure out how much this may be impacting your recovery. And it's just an insightful thing for you to do to help you reflect, and then you can journal about it, or you can learn more about it and just start really working at any of the boxes that you checked and understanding that they're playing a role in your recovery. So to get the checklist, all you have to do is go to thehasociety.com/blind spot, and we'll send it straight through to you. You can print it off and you can check on it every now and then. I always recommend a reflection point every 4 to 6 weeks. How are you going? Are you still checking that behavior off, or have you systematically kicked it to the curb? So check it out. It's thehasociety.com/blind spot, and it will be waiting for you there.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Hypothalamic Amenorrhea Podcast. This is Ashley, and I have Rachel Reed with us. She is we've had some OGs on lately, and she's definitely one of the OGs of the OGs. And so I just think her story is interesting. Well, because it's all of our story, right? I mean, all of us think that we're so unique. I'm such a special butterfly. I am unique. I am the unicorn. And then you meet 20 other people like you. Were like, oh, okay. So we're like a thing.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys are my people. Okay. So maybe it's not just me. So I'm excited just to kind of hand over the mic and let you just kind of tell your story. Maybe starting off how did HA develop for you? When did you find the HA Society, coaching, and then your fertility journey?
Yeah. So it's a lot to unpack. So we'll start and see, and hopefully it will all make sense. Because I think that's also something is when you do start looking back at it, you're like, wait, which happened when?
Yes.
And first, I will just kick off calling back to what you said about being the unicorn. It's funny because it's within HA, we all are not unicorns together. But then when we start looking at the outside and we want to compare to the people who don't have HA, that is where we're like, no, we are a unicorn together.
I am the unicorn. Stop
it's the unicorn you don't want to be. The not cool unicorn.
Oh, yes. Okay. So now looking back, obviously, you have a baby now, but how did HA develop for you?
So
tell me about that.
I mean, definitely I'm a prime candidate now, realizing it. I'd heard of the athlete triad, but had always, never thought of myself as enough of an athlete for that to be what was going on, even though I took my athletics very seriously. And that would have definitely proven to be a large sticking point in my recovery process. I'm not a pro athlete, so it was like, that's not me. But I think, so athletics definitely played a part. And then I've always, not always, but for a good portion of my life, run at a pretty high anxiety level. I strive to do really well at whatever I am doing. So just all the little things that, on their own can sometimes be really beneficial and really great. But when taken to extremes, and definitely when they all come together, can kind of just be a mess if your body's not quite on board for all of it. And I think definitely too. And then if you're not fueling for it. So all that said, I have had kind of off and on period stuff since I was younger. I went on birth control really early, to regulate your period, because that's what it does. Not, but yeah. So in high school, it was kind of, I think it also coincided with some anxiety. But I had lost quite a bit of weight in high school. They put me on birth control, and I was kind of like, okay, fine. I didn't, know any better at the time. So started then, and then, really, definitely weight was pretty low all through college. And at that point, I probably was in H8 then too, but I had that was so far and so not on the board. So we'll zoom ahead, but just knowing background of junk already. I gained quite a bit of weight after college and was definitely cycling again. But not super excited about the body that I was in at that point. And so it was just kind of, working to change things, but really trying. I really was wanting to do it in a more balanced and, healthy way. But again, I had very little resources at that time. Definitely didn't know anything about HA as a possibility. It was just kind of navigating it as best I could. I found CrossFit. I got really into that and enjoyed it a lot. And then was also doing triathlons, and that's how I met my now husband. And basically I add in all that just to say, once we got married, it was like, well, hey, we're not quite ready to have kids yet. I've taken birth control before. That had been a thing. Like, let's just do that for the first part of our marriage. I'd already started feeling a little bit weird about birth control, but I was kind of like, nah, this is fine. We're just gonna, this is what we're gonna do. So long story short, kind of bringing you up to current HA issues, was we had to change our insurance. And so the birth control I was on was no longer covered by the insurance we had. So I switched birth control and started having 2 periods a month. So I was like, man, if I'm having 2 periods a month, this just seems like, to regulate my period, like this is a pain in the butt. So I think I'm just going to go off. By that point, I want to say my husband and I had been married maybe 4 years. We were like, oh, if kids happen, that could be okay. We'll feel a little bit more ready for that. But I will say, so too, before going off birth control, it all kind of happened right at, the same time. I had increased my training a fair amount and was quite a bit more intentional about it. As well as I had probably, well, I don't know that I'd increased my calories, but I definitely cleaned up my eating. And so I cleaned it up, but I was eating more because, that's how it works, the volume. So I was eating more volume and probably, and was trying to fuel better, but I was still very calculated. And now when I know the number of calories I can intake at kind of a maintenance level, the amount I was at was just insanely low. But still, comparatively to what I'd hear from other people, it was like, oh gosh, I'm definitely not under eating. That's not a thing. So
yeah. So when you say like cleaned up your intake, is this more like, because like when I joined the CrossFit scene, it was very much like eat paleo and clean up you know what I mean? And, clean carbs
Yes.
and, you know what I mean? Like, like bread was out,
Yes.
but
Which for me, so I was pretty, I've never been like a full on anything person because I really hate like labels and stuff. And so I never would have said I was like full paleo, but I was high, low carb. Um, and
as like high. So then like whenever,
as in like excited, very on board with low carb.
yeah, you're like, yeah, I can get behind that. So would you say that you were like a lot of high veggies, meaning that like I'm eating carbs? Look at me, I'm eating like fruit, I'm eating berries, I'm eating salads, I'm eating bell peppers. My plate is super colorful, like that type of volume. So like, because like honestly, like I mean, it's just a lot of food whenever you're eating quote unquote clean.
Um, so 100%. Now, I will say I've always been a fan. Like that was the other reason why, it seemed so great was because I am not like, I don't have to like, I didn't force feed myself veggies. Like I liked them, like
Right.
I was like, oh, I enjoy most of the food I'm eating. And again, since I wasn't like strict paleo, I've always had a sweet tooth. So I was like, I can't just like not eat brownies. Like I'm gonna make them work, but I'm gonna be strategic about it. And basically it was like outside of, my specified dessert items and vegetables, like I'm not a huge bread person. I don't actually care for pasta a lot, so letting go of them wasn't hard.
Right.
And I was like, well, I don't need them, they're bad for me anyway.
Right. That's really interesting because I think that there was a lot of things that I was like, oh, if I could like be lean and have a six pack and let go of like bread, man, okay, I guess I could do it as long as I can have this, right? So I guess all this to say is like I think it's really interesting how like low energy availability, which is like the overall umbrella, that's
Mm-hmm.
it's like replaces the female triad, you know what I mean?
Yes,
Is basically can happen from intentional and unintentional reduction in calories.
correct. Because at
You know
this
what I mean?
time, I definitely wanted, I was on board for changing my body composition, but I can truthfully tell you, when I started training and then changing my nutrition, it was intentional to try and fuel my training better. Like I thought I was
Right,
doing something good. Now, granted, I had some disordered eating patterns in the
right,
past. So the fact that I would fall into that makes a lot of sense. But like
right,
this felt like the most healthy and definitely the most the least restrictive type of, I wasn't now necessarily, I can't have foods, although I mean I did not have foods, but
right,
like
right,
that wasn't the mentality behind it. And if anything, here I was eating volume wise. So I felt like I was eating a ton.
right,
So I was like, man, I'm like crushing it. And my body did change in a way that I got response on. And like, I think that was a challenge because in the moment, I think my body probably changed even past what I was shooting for. But again, I got so much praise for it, that it was hard to let go. And
mhm, mhm,
even though it wasn't intentional, I didn't get into it thinking I'm going to have like this rocking body. It was more just like, I want to perform really well. People are telling me this is how I do it. And this is the amount of food that I need and the types of food I should eat. And I love knowing what to do. So someone told me this is what to do and I'm going to do it.
yeah,
And then it worked at first. It seemed to be working at first. And my body comp changed, training went really well. And it probably only lasted for maybe a year. And then I would say definitely the anxiety was still
mm,
high / started feeling high. Training definitely didn't seem as fun. Pressure behind training seemed a lot more intense. And just a lot of the reasons for why I had originally gotten into it didn't seem to exist quite as strongly, but now these new pressures to keep maintaining were there. So So anyway, a little bit aside, but so I had all of that kind of happened around the time that I started having this new birth control and the issues on the birth control. So I went off of it at a much leaner weight than I probably had been since college, which I don't even know if then, because I was just skinny in college, like I probably since high school when I was an athlete in high school.
Right.
But so again, still felt like I'm in a pretty BMI wise, a healthy body, all that kind of stuff. So probably 4 or 5 months went by, no period. And even though I'd heard it could take up to a year, I was like, I really want to check into this. So I did start reaching out to some doctors, which, my gynecologist, and was like, hey, not having a period. And, I'm still getting over some of my, I know there are amazing doctors out there and I work with some amazing doctors, but then there's also some that it's just not their thing. So, nobody really mentioned anything to me about it. And, or I can say, I think some of them did, but it was in such a way that was so unsupportive. And there was no backing of it was basically well, maybe you should stop working out. And you're like, as a person who that's pretty ingrained in what you're doing, that just being thrown out there was that can't be what's needing to happen. You're just going to tell me you should work out less. So I was kind of okay, I don't think that's the issue. And again, because I felt you can look at, there's so many other people at X weight or doing X amount of more training who, quote unquote, I assumed had a period, I didn't probably know half the time. But so the doctors maybe mentioned it could be something to do with, never using the word energy availability, but definitely in the sense of body composition and fuel, but never in a way that really felt like they really had much conviction behind it either. And so it was what? So I'm just supposed to go gain weight and on my own, and you think that's going to give me a period? I'm not really sure. But obviously too, we also ran a bunch of tests. I mean, all the tests,
Yeah.
The MRIs of your pituitary and making sure that, you can cycle and all that good stuff. And took, over the course of years, and eventually, most of them are everything looks great, which was a huge relief, you have eggs.
Yeah. So, let's dive into that a little bit. How many different tests? I mean, I like to giggle about this because I'm I don't think there's a test that I didn't have ran.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned the MRI and I know it's hard to remember any and all of them, but I think I remember as far as I took a SIBO test. I took
No, I will say, Ash, I've heard you took a lot. I did not, but then again, I think you also worked with maybe a few more naturopathic doctors also. So
yeah, which weren't helpful, but I mean,
I didn't get some of those, but I mean, I did work with gynecologists, endocrinologists, a few more holistic practitioners, nutritionists, and just general doctors. And I mean, we definitely had, lots of blood work done, testing. And I will say, so when we got my hormones tested, everything was in the tank. So, including testosterone. So I had nothing.
Yeah.
But then, we did I want to say I had possibly two MRIs. And then the other interesting part that popped up, which again is, I'm sure the Lord would have revealed it in some way. I mean, this was obviously the way he chose, but because of all this and just having more involvement with female anatomy and stuff, they did end up finding a mass in my in my cervix. And at one point, because they did do ultrasounds also, and so they'd found a mass in my cervix. And when they first found it, it was pretty small, and they were like, "We're not actually that worried about it." But it actually ended up becoming kind of a side deal that took away from just period, investigation. because it did start changing at some point. And so in 2020, I mean, praise the Lord, right? Literally the week before COVID shutdown started, I went up to St. Louis for a surgery to have this mass removed, which turned out to not be a mass, but a bunch of adhesive scar tissue that we have no idea how it got there.
So like with no signs of like endometriosis or any
No,
history.
and I
Yeah,
never,
because I'm like, girl, I don't think you've ever mentioned any
yeah,
symptoms along that line. So
I
just
never had any other, because my sister actually, we kind of think leans more towards the endometriosis side and has a lot of the symptoms that, like, my symptoms were never corresponding with endometriosis. And yeah, and it was super bizarre. Like, yeah, but they got in there and they were surprised that there wasn't a mass to be found, but there was just a ton of scar tissue. So part of me also was like, part of me was like hopeful, maybe this was just like blocking.
Maybe this is it. This is it, guys.
But
we
at
found
the same
it.
time, it's like, maybe it's good that I wasn't having periods with this, like, who knows? But it was very interesting. And it definitely, yeah, kind of took a slight segue. And again, I had slight fingers crossed of like, maybe I was, kind of waited to hold out for the surgery that like, maybe this will be like the magic bullet that like, this is what's wrong. Even though in my gut, I kind of I don't think this is why I'm not having a period.
Yeah.
It would contribute to having like weird period stuff if I had a period. But it was like, hormone wise, I was like, this doesn't explain why my hormones aren't where they need.
Everything's still in the tank.
Yeah.
Okay. So no pituitary tumor, nothing else to explain.
Yeah,
I will say, I've had people, not people, but like early when they're like, yeah, maybe you just need to gain weight. I'm like, what? I mean, just because it was just so shocking. So like technically they weren't wrong, but there was no explaining. It was just like, this is what you should do. And I'm like, almost so shocked because, and I mean, I think it's just truthful of our society. We only hear how beneficial weight loss is. And so if you stub your toe, please lose weight. If you can't like see straight, please lose weight. If your like hair's falling out, please lose weight. You know what I mean? Like, like that's always so so for the first time to hear from a doctor, like you probably just need to gain weight. First off, it was so shocking. And then with no explanation, I'm like, just so in shock that I almost didn't have anything to say because I was like just trying to gather myself.
Oh my gosh.
I mean?
That is
a huge thank you to TempDrop for sponsoring this podcast. TempDrop is a fertility awareness monitoring tool that I love. It's a wearable device which you can use instead of taking your temperature manually with a thermometer each morning. As you may know, we recommend the fertility awareness method both as you're going through recovery and 100,000% after you have gone through recovery as you move forward for the rest of your reproductive years. TempDrop gives you everything you need to effortlessly track your fertility. You wear the TempDrop sensor while you sleep for accurate basal body temperature readings without the stress of early morning wake-ups. I personally love and need this because with a toddler, my wake-up times are all over the place and the occasional sleep disruptions are making the use of an oral thermometer increasingly more difficult. TempDrop's accompanying charting app enables you to track an array of symptoms alongside your BBT, including cervical mucus and OPKs, and even gives you sleep insights. Combine these fertility signs all in one place to identify your fertile window, confirm ovulation, plan for your period, or identify pregnancy. Whether you are trying to conceive or avoiding pregnancy, or you want to chart your fertility for health reasons like HA recovery to see where you're at in the process, TempDrop makes fertility awareness accessible to all women, even if you don't have regular cycles or sleeping patterns. Track your ovulation in real time with TempDrop. Get 10% off your order when you go to tempdrop.co. thehasociety.com and use the code HASociety at checkout. Please support this show by using our link and our discount code. Get your temp drop at the time of this recording and send us a screenshot of your purchase either via Instagram, or you can email us, Danny at thehasociety.com, having used our discount code HASociety. So it has to be in the screenshot to get your 10% off. When you send that to us, we will send you free access to our fertility awareness method for HA course. Again, that's tempdrop.thehasociety.com and use HA Society at the checkout to also get access to our course that we usually sell. And one more thing to sweeten the pot is that you can put this 10% code on top of any other pre-existing sales they're doing. So I know that they're doing regularly 15% off and 20% off sales. And so if you go specifically to tempdrop.thehasociety.com, it will apply an additional 10% off to whatever sale is going on. So you can't lose. You get the temp drop, you get probably multiple discounts, and you get our fam course. So definitely check it out. And again, support our sponsors so that we can keep giving you this show for free. Thanks.
No, that explains it so well, because yes, it's like, even, I mean, yeah, there's,
I mean, for someone who's super talkative, I literally didn't have anything to say back the first time like a doctor said that. Granted, they didn't say this is HA, let alone explain that or whatever, but they were just like, you know, you might want to try like just gaining some weight. And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, and I would agree. Like without, that's where it was. Like without any context, without the support, you're telling me to go out into a society that values weight loss, or you know, highlights weight loss, and you want me to do this, telling me that you think it's going to make me healthier, even though you really haven't explained any of this to me. That sounds like a really not idea that I'm gonna just jump on board with here. Oh my gosh, because yes, I agree, and which is so sad. And I was just actually talking to my husband the other day of how, you know, our view of where health is actually a reason someone needs to lose weight is probably much farther than where we think it is. And yet, like, because there is a level, but it's like, I think, you know, as a society, we cut it off a lot sooner. But yeah, so that to say, when these doctors were telling me this, it was like, yeah, I don't think that's what I'm needing. But so let's see. So all that had happened. Thankfully, I did have, I mean, kind of when it started all like coming together was, you know, I'd been basically, so I did eventually go on some hormones, which I had really not wanted. And all along I was like, I don't understand how taking other hormones is going to give me my hormones back.
Was this birth control or was this bioidentical?
Yes, the second.
Bioidentical?
They were bioidentical. But I still was like, and actually I took both. I took the non-bioidentical, just like hormones through a endocrinologist, and then I didn't love how I felt on those. So I did go to a more natural doctor who did the bioidentical, but I still was kind of like, no, I feel like there's some, like, I've had these hormones before. Why is my body not making them? And
why are they all gone? Where did they go?
Yeah. And thankfully I did have a nutritionist who is very like actual health oriented and very like works with a lot of female athletes. And she had kind of mentioned before, like, maybe we could try increasing your calories. So I kind of gave her like the go ahead of like, okay, we can try that, but like super slow. So it was like, you know, maybe like 200 calories more, or like maybe 500. And then around this time I did find about at the same time was Stephanie Buttermore and No Period Now What. And actually, obviously Stephanie actually talks about No Period Now What too, but I found them independently before. And then I was like, oh, that girl knows about her too. Anyway, and and I just started, I heard what Stephanie was saying, which I think, she talked about just her like ravenous hunger, which I don't know that I maybe probably had to the level she did, but I also don't know that I realized it because I just had a different eating strategy too, but like just that mental hunger, like, but so listening to her talk. And then I think what was really encouraging was the fact, like, don't quote me on this, but I want to say she hadn't even lost her period when she went all in on her thing. And I was like, dang it, if that girl can do this on social media, like, that's really encouraging. And I was like, I think there's something here because
Yes.
because in addition to the whole period thing and my hormones, I was like, I don't like the relationship I have with food all the time. I don't like the relationship I have with fitness all the time. I want this to be different. And so that was also always there, that it was like, just kind of, pushing me forward. And then I did get, I read enough to know, I think I should order the No Period Now What book. When I did, I was like, this is me. Like, this is what is going on.
Yeah.
So
For reference, I love Stephanie Buttermore. I think it takes so much to like, I mean, there was no documenting my journey. I was a psycho. I say that all the time. Like, I was so unstable mentally because I was like swinging from one emotion to the other about everything. And so, no, very much like you, I was like, well, if this chick can do it, like, so can I. Like, like, I think I just needed, and I think that's why, like, we try to share as many testimonials and success stories, is like, because truly I was like, if this chick can do it, I can do it too. You know what I mean?
yes,
Not so much like in competition, but I just
which is
needed.
like right. I would say it's like the weirdest, so often before we're like, if that person can lift 500 pounds, so can I.
Totally.
But
Yes.
this was like the first time that I felt like, well, not the first time, but like one of the times where I felt like this is a healthy, if that person can do it, so can I.
Yes,
Versus
yes.
so many other times where we want to apply that, and it's like, if that person can go to the NBA, so can I. And you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think like sometimes you just need to see someone do something that
Big.
goes against the grain.
Yes.
And it's almost like, like we talk about this all the time. It's like you almost just need permission to do it.
Oh, 100%. Like, that is so true and so frustrating sometimes, because you're like, no, I actually don't need anyone else's permission to do this, but something in me feels like it does.
Well, yeah, 100%. Okay. So you find Stephanie Buttermore, you order the book, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is me.
Yes. So I actually ended up having a call with, I hope if she listens to this ever, but Nicola, I want to say is how she said her name. And I think I had 2 calls with her, and kind of was just like, these are my son, like, just to kind of, what's the word? Cement that, like, this is, yes, I am an HA person. We went through it. She was like, yeah, that sounds, so I was just kind of the confirmation of like, this is what you have. So now here are some, like, now I know, okay, I have some roadmaps for like how this progresses. So I was very encouraged by all of that at that time, but also terrified, because it was like, whoa, what's going to happen here? So I told my nutritionist. She was like full, like on board 100%. And then she came back. I was like, I think I'm ready to make like a big calorie jump. Like, this is a big deal. And I was expecting her to maybe, because in the book too, they kind of, that like 2,500 is kind of that big, that big number. So I was like, oh, it's going to be like right around there, like maybe 2,700. But honestly, and and hopefully that's, I already ate probably, like, in my HA, I always had 2,000 calories, like, and sometimes up to 22. Like, I was pretty solid at that point. But yeah, she came back to me.
I think it's fair that like, you are of all of my clients, like, your caloric intake is much higher than like the average bear.
That's
like, no doubt.
I would say, I don't know that you've ever shared that with me in our calls, but
yeah, I mean, I think I've said like, hey girl, like, like, everyone else can do 2,500, but like, you ain't, like, ever.
Oh, true.
Never.
But it's still sometimes, even still, it's still sometimes encouraging and good to hear, because like, yeah, if I'm looking at what other people eat, I'm like, dude, like even now with more carbs in and still, because I just love vegetables, so still vegetables, there's just times that I'm like, I think I'm a teenage boy. Like that the movie 17 again, there have been days, especially in HA recovery, where I was like, that the scene where he just has like all the food spread out on the counter, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, okay, so I just kind of, I mean, like we'll probably get to this, but no, there was multiple times in your journey where like I was like, yes, somebody else can recover on 2500, but like you're not going to keep your period at 2500. You know what I mean? To where like, I mean, like you recovered requires more.
Yes.
It just requires more, and like it could feel super scary, especially
Yeah.
when other people share
Okay.
how much they're eating, and like it's not a bad thing that other people share how much they're eating, because there is bio individuality, but it's just really
Yes.
tough whenever you're not confident in your own path.
Yes.
But for so I mean, like we'll get to that part of your journey, but that's what we had to work on, was like you, Rachel, as an individual.
I
You
know, like that,
require
and that being
way
the part again
more
where,
carbs and fat than like the average bear.
right,
It
right.
it just is.
Again, it's like one of those places where you're like not expecting to be the unicorn, but then you were like, oh wait, here
You're like,
I
that's
am.
not the unicorn I wanted to be.
Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly. It's
Can
so
I please trade in my unicorn status for something else? Thank you.
right, right.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like you had the consult. You tell your nutritionist you're ready.
Yes. So she came back with me and came back to me with, she was like, I want you to eat like 4,000 calories. And I was like, oh, okay. Wow. But I was like, you know what? Like I'm committed. Like basically I was at the point where it was like, I had done all the hormones. I had done everything else. So I was like, if nothing is wrong, it's worth giving this a shot, so I can at least say I gave it a shot. If it doesn't work, we'll figure out what to do then. But if it does, like, whoa. So I was like, okay, I will do my best. And seriously, for like the next 2 weeks, eating felt like a full-time job.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I felt like I was like rolling to bed every night. Cause I mean, I already didn't necessarily feel like I was like under eating. Like I was definitely restrictive. But I mean, yeah, it was just like basically eat everything you want and more. And I was like, I like sometimes, and that's a crazy part too of recovery, depending on the person. Like sometimes it was super fun and freeing and awesome. And other times you were like, I don't freaking want to eat any more food, but I'm only at 2,800 calories. Crap.
Right.
Like I need to shove some stuff down my throat. So that was interesting. I ended up probably then leveling out at about 3,400 for another month or so. And like it slowly kind of dwindled down, but I would say still, I usually hit between maybe 28 being like a low. And for a month. And I mean, and naturally, and then, I mean, I gained weight, like I started gaining weight. And I will say, and that's the other crazy part, like, even on that amount of calories, it wasn't like I was just like dumping weight on, or my nutritionist would have changed stuff, but like, it was incremental. I mean, I'd gain a couple pounds, like it was actually like a pretty healthy amount of weight gain in an amount of time. Still felt super uncomfortable, after being in the body that you are, any amount of weight, you're like, hey, I noticed this.
Yeah.
So it was still very challenging, but yeah, it was also super, like, it was challenging to eat all the food, and it's a weird experience.
Yeah.
There was something else though there that I was about the food, but now it's not coming to me. But anyway, so that was the first part. And that I increased the calories about, I want to say like before the summer of 2020. So midsummer, and still by like November, December, I mean, I was gaining weight clearly, but still no period. Now I was still training pretty much the same way that I had been So, that was really my last hold. I was like, I don't want to change this, even though, fitness is like, even though part of me wanted to, because it was like, there was still so much anxiety around it, but it was like, this is what I do. I need to keep doing it. But yeah, so training was about the same. Food had increased, and let's see. So then it kind of came down to a crossroads again of like, okay, well, something still needs to change. I'm still holding out in this, like, this is an area that I'm holding out in, I guess. And so I made kind of I don't know, not really a bet, but like a barter with my husband. Because I mean, he, at this point, I mean, I was still very like, I'd say I knew I wanted a family, but I was still very nervous about all of it. Like, it's such a huge responsibility. And I was just like, Lord, I'm a hot mess by myself, and I'm supposed to bring a child into this. Like, how will I do that? Like, all those kind of thoughts. So like, I never took parenting lightly. I knew it was like, I looked at it as like an adventure that I really hoped to go on, and knew it would just be like amazing and unlike anything else you ever did, but also terrifying again. And so I think that was sometimes, I know a lot of there, or at least not a lot, or a good number of the girls, who come into the HA Society are motivated, but like, I'm ready to get pregnant. And that was kind of a double-edged sword for me, because part of me was like, yes, I am. But then part of me was also like, oh, I'm not sure if I am. So like, maybe we'll just wait, but I knew I wanted my period, because I was like, this just seems like a really important health marker that I'm missing. And so all that to say, the barter came that we were kind of like, but we would, I was getting older. I was like, we would like to start, if we're going to start a family, the next 2 years is kind of like when it really needs to happen. So I basically told him, okay, there's this big team competition coming up. What if I made it kind of like my last hurrah for like more intense training? I don't know if I've shared that with you before. And more intense training. I'm going to train for this competition, and then I'm going to cut like way back. So John was on board, and he was like, okay, I like this. Let's do it. Like, I'm going to cheer you on for this comp. It's going to be great. And then I'm going to hold you to it for cutting back. And I was like, okay, so that's what happened. I did the comp. It was one of my favorite, like, so glad I did it. Some of my best friends, like, team comps are always the way to go. And then I was like, okay, we're going to strip back on the training. And I can't say 100% sure. Oh, because that's what if you couldn't tell, I'm kind of a tracker of things. So I had been tracking my calories, but that is why I also can't. So I know when I first started where I was, but after a while, it just stressed me out knowing how many calories I was, but wanting to keep eating them.
Right.
So I was like, I just need to take a break from tracking for a little bit. But I also tracked my fitness. When I started cutting back on fitness, I also was like, okay, I'm just going to kind of take a little bit back from that. But I'd say I probably went down to maybe, still maybe like workouts, like 3 to 4 a week, but they were like not anything compared to what I was doing. Like, so I put a limit on like the amount of weight I'd let on my bar. I took lots of breaks, cardio. I'd already taken cardio out, before, like a way less dynamic. It was much more bodybuilding, straight strength-esque, using like 60% or less type of mentality. And we'd go on lots of walks. And then my grandma got sick, and that, and I don't know if it's like, I just needed that whole week or what, but like I'd already cut back on the fitness. My grandma got sick, and I can say that is the first week probably in years where I literally did nothing but sit with my family and be with my grandma before she passed away. And I don't know if it just took that full intentional like stop, but that it's just, emotional stuff. But
right, yeah.
The day that they called to tell me that my grandma had passed away, I started my period.
Oh.
And so that was like super, a weird combination of emotions there.
You're like, I'm grieving and I'm incredibly shocked, astonished, and happy.
Oh.
And like relieved that this is actually working.
Yep.
Swinging back to grieving, swinging back to like.
Exactly. Yeah, that was
How did your day go? Well, today
was a big day.
Today was a big day with big emotions, and I went everywhere.
Yes. So, and thankfully, I mean, I have an amazing, loving family who was also able to like hold that space with me, that I was able to like tell them that I had started my period and that they were, able to celebrate with me while we also all grieved. Like it was really beautiful in some really complex ways. But so I had that stop. I started my period, but I will say, and this is kind of where the HA Society kind of comes on the scene, is that it was super light. So I knew, okay, we're not just like out of the woods yet, but there was also still a part of me that was like, but I feel like, ooh, like we're excited, like things are happening. So like maybe we could, start shifting things just a little bit, because we're still pretty
when everybody does their second cycle, but maybe, just maybe, I can make some changes and go back.
Yeah, maybe, because it's still uncomfortable. Like this, we're not at homeostasis yet.
Yeah, maybe, just maybe, I could just cut back on food. Maybe I don't need this much food.
Yeah, or maybe I could just work a little bit, like I could be a little bit more intentional with my training.
Maybe I could just go a little bit harder my second.
Yeah, I could feel a little bit more like, oh, I did something today type of, So I knew, so one, that did kind of happen, but more than anything, I knew that was my personality. So I was like, I need support in this. Like, I'm not going to be able to just stay in this. Like, great. I'm so like, and I think that was the thing, was I was like, now I know it works. I need somebody to keep me here. So I also think this had to have been like the Lord working in interesting ways, because I had found Danny. I don't even know, like I had followed her. I want to say, because I followed WAG for a while. Mm-hmm. And then Danny would sometimes make posts. And I just happened to come across one of her HA posts one time. And I was like,
so guys, this is way back in the day.
Way back.
When Danny and I used to work at the same company, the same nutrition company that we both developed HA at.
Yes. And so
I mean, like it wasn't the company's fault, but like we just happened. I mean, there's long story short, it was we're like big kids, we're adults. We made our own decision to like diet down, and but that happened to be the same place where like we met, we both developed HA, and they were like, we should do some
pressure. I mean, there's a lot of pressure. You're nutrition coaches.
Yeah.
So I had followed her, and I was like, hey, like, and I, crossover. I don't know if I'd already had no period, now what, but whatever. I read it, and again, it resonated with me, and I was like, she's worth keeping tabs on. So I had followed her, and she had an email list for a while she was still, before she started HA Society, but I think, it was in her brain. And so she would occasionally send out these messages, and again, they were encouraging, and I was like, yeah, I like this. I think she has some good stuff that I'm on board with, but terrified to implement in my life. But like, this is cool.
Yeah, that's good for her.
yeah. I was like, go you, and
go you, not for me.
She finally opened up the HA Society, and I want to say I didn't join right away, but I think I was probably definitely within the first 6 months of it being open. And but yeah, so long story short, I had this first period. I was like, I know I need some help. I'd heard about that HA Society thing that this girl Danny had, and I was like, I looked into it, and I was like, at the time, I want to say it was maybe, because it was still pretty early, like maybe $11 a month to be in the society. Yeah. And I was like, okay, again, kind of like the giving it a shot. I was like, what's $11 for 1 month? If I hate it, I can stop. Like,
yeah,
no big deal. Well, that did not happen. So
3 years later, or
because
I don't even know how many years, y'all.
because I mean, even though I know, like, financially, sometimes I am wondering, I'm like, I just need to be a lifelong member, but I don't know financially if my husband will always be like, hopefully there will be a day where I don't have any thing that, and he's like, do we still need this? And I'll be like, yes, I love those people. But yeah, so I got in and I was like, hopped on some of the community calls early on, and I was just like so encouraged, like just like to have so many other girls who were like, I want to make these changes. It is super hard, but like, this is what I need to do. When you're normally surrounded by fitness culture, was like so empowering and just awesome, because it was like the community that you needed to do what you knew you actually needed to do to be healthy. And I just remember thinking, no, this is where I need to be. So I was probably, I think I had it somewhere. I want to say I joined the society in like March. I think I joined the society in March, and then by April I was like, I think I want to coach. And that's when you came on the scene. So so then from there,
I feel like you were one of my very first clients that like was like, no, I already got my period, and I was like, okay, so what am I doing
why
here?
are you here?
Like, not like what are you doing? I'm like, okay, what do you want me, like, okay, like I'm a little lost at what you need from me. And you're like, no, I just need accountability to make sure I keep it. I was like, oh yeah, like, yeah, I specialize in accountability. I mean, which really, I really do feel like we do specialize in accountability. There is an art to it. You know what I mean? But
true.
I was like, yeah, I could do that for you.
That's so funny, because from the beginning I would have never. No, I was like, I feel like yeah, we grew together, so it was great. But no, I was like, I want to work on, because as I said before, it was like, I want to get my period back, but there's also like all the things that got me there, I want to work on them too. Like, I want to have better mentality around food and around fitness and around my body and how that plays into my faith and all of that. And I came on knowing too that I was like, I knew I would get some greater like science and physical insight into what was going on, which I found fascinating. And the more I learned about it, the more it was like, okay, this is helpful for helping me understand what's going on in my body and why these things need to change. But yeah, then I just got so much more. I remember too, in some of our first weeks, I would be like, okay, we need some homework. Like, we did homework, and had various like questions that I'd kind of, think through and work on. And because I think that is why I signed up in April, was because I'd had that period in February. I joined the HA Society, and then I didn't have a period in March. And I think too, I had my second period in May. So I think it was early after working with you, but we were like, I had a second period, and this period felt like what I remembered periods being like. Yeah. And I was like, this feels like a solid, like, okay, we're definitely getting somewhere. And so then you and I continued so that I would stay accountable with the food, with how I was doing things. But I will say, as far as now finally getting to the pregnancy part, it still was really such a like far off hope. But my first goal was like, I want to get my period back. And I think I also just assumed I would need to have a fairly regular period before I would be able to get pregnant. So I was really just thinking and looking towards having a monthly period. And I really was kind of like, and probably I need it for like at least 3 months or something before we would like move our next mentality to conception. And then we started tracking temperatures, because I hadn't been doing that. And that was how, it kind of happened. We were like around the time that third period would be coming. and I was tracking my temperatures, and my temperatures were always pretty wonky. So I was always like, I don't know that this is going to help us with anything. And then we had a couple days that were that were elevated, and I was like, oh, well, maybe I ovulated. Like, and that really was the biggest. And I was like, I wanted to get my period back and to make sure I was ovulating. So I was like, well, this is cool. And I remember either we'd like, it happened in between our calls, because then when I finally did call you to tell you that I was pregnant, you were kind of like, yeah, I kind of thought that might have happened looking at your temperature. But you were like, but I wasn't going to tell you, I think you're pregnant.
So this is so fun. So I just recorded a podcast with one of my other OG clients.
I'm going to have to go listen to it.
And she was the one who actually was like, here, let me just send you this. And it was a picture of all of her food, right? Like, she had started the food view thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this with all my clients. And so what's really fun is that right now, like, we're launching Restore Your Fertility. And what's been so fun for me is that talking with all these OG clients, like, this is how we came up with our process, was working with you guys and figuring out what is it that, like, you know what I mean? So like, you guys are part of the process. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you guys are part of the process, which I think is just like so cool, because that like you were one of the clients where you're like, because we had never met any other practitioners that were using FAM and basal body tracking as part of a diagnostic for HA recovery. That's something that we were like, Danny got certified. It's Danny who's the FAM she's like certified in it. And, she's taught me everything, because obviously, like, we work together. Right. And so then, like, I started incorporating it with my clients. And then like, that's how, like, I was able to see, like, as people were recovering, I was able to see how their charts. So that's how, like, now down the line, I'm like, girl, I know where we're at. I'm going to need you to not jump off the ship. I'm going to need you to stay focused.
Right.
You know what I mean? I know you want to quit, but you are, you know what I mean? But it's because of you guys, like, like the OGs of the OGs, you know what I mean? And so back then, y'all, I wouldn't tell people that they were pregnant, because I was like, I don't know, like, do you tell somebody that they're pregnant? Like,
right.
You know what I mean? But, like, Danny and I would, like, send each other, like, people start to be like, dude, she's totally pregnant, and I don't think she knows yet. Like, at our next call, I'm going to have to tell her she's pregnant. You know what I mean? Because honestly, and again, because you're an OG client, we weren't exactly like, that wasn't our goal to get people pregnant.
Well, and I mean, and like I said, I mean, at that point, it wasn't, I mean, yes, we were hoping soon, but like, it was a surprise to us too. And actually though, the other funny part is, because we were, starting to get to be more intentional, but like, in our somewhat attempt, because my periods were so wonky, but I still tried to think like, okay, this is around the time that like maybe I'd be ovulating, because we were definitely not on any kind of schedule for us time type of deal. But I was like, well, this week we might just try to do it a little bit more off chance. It was totally the wrong week. That week was not the week. And so it was legitimately just a random time that it ended up being, and I was ovulating, that I had no idea about, that then, and we conceived. But no, we actually did, quote unquote, try, but it was not at the time that it would have worked.
Which I think lets us know that, like, yes, clearly we believe in tracking. Clearly we believe in being intentional in order to help people get pregnant, you know what I mean, who are like, let's expedite this because I wanted to be pregnant yesterday, right? Obviously, like, that's kind of like the clients that we're working with now. But in the beginning, it was like, well, we just got to get ovulation up and running, and then cervical mucus will take control and your sex drive will increase around. And honestly, like, back to the simpler days. And in the beginning, you know what I mean? Of like, really and truly, I actually think that that's almost technically the best way, because like you can almost feel your sex drive increase around ovulation, and then now that once you've been like recovered and you're like, oh, there is a pattern to my cervical mucus, because in the
Right.
first like 4 to 5 months there's really not I mean, maybe some
No,
people get a quicker pattern, but I know for like me, I think it's like 6 months is when I saw a distinct pattern, and now I can tell the pattern regardless, right? I'm
I
like,
would say,
oh
which is also for anyone listening, and just, but like it's also kind of the like the double-edged sword to is like that now, because I am breastfeeding too, and so I still haven't gotten my period back, but like I didn't never have the regularity of it
yeah,
before.
because
And
you
like
got pregnant.
it will be interesting now on the flip side of like
Yeah.
becoming, because yeah, I was still like, my cervical mucus was still kind of like, here, there,
Yeah.
everywhere, and like temperatures, like I said. So it was still a wonky time, which is why I was so flabbergasted when it was like, oh my gosh, you're pregnant.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I didn't want to tell you, but your chart looks like you're pregnant.
Yeah, I remember, I'm pretty sure, because I didn't want to wait until our call. So I did just text you, and then and I was like, oh my gosh. And you were like, I kind of think I knew that. And I was like, really? So yeah, but it was super, yeah, super fun and super crazy. And yeah, totally, again, pregnancy was definitely on our radar, but I just didn't think it would happen that soon.
Yeah, yeah.
Which
And
I think
like
it's
it's like
also,
I love this part of your story because like you knew the importance of like okay, yes, clearly I got the first bleed, but there's something not right. And to be fair, most first bleeds we don't expect to be phenomenal, right? But I mean, just you intuitively knowing like, oh, hold up. This isn't the end of the road and I'm going to need help staying here.
yes.
You know what I mean? That in order to keep these hormones that I worked so hard to get
Oh my
and
God.
to get pregnant, you know what I mean? Which I think is I just love your story too, because a lot of times, especially HAers, we're like, of course everything has to be perfect before I get pregnant. And the body is
Yes,
like, I'm not holding any grudge. I actually just need you to feed me and allow me to rest, and I can actually get this job done. I'm not
yes.
holding a grudge. I'm gonna need you to forgive yourself and let's move on.
Yes.
You know
No,
what
and
I
that's what I
mean?
was gonna say, is like, just to, as a note of encouragement to anyone, yeah, that is still working, that it's like, once those things are there, like they're good to go, because the rest of your body is ready to do this once it has the energy. And so
Yeah.
I think that was such a big message to me of like, yeah, it didn't have to be this perfect measured out thing. It was like, hey, we're ovulating now. Like, technically that's what we need. So here we go. Let's have a
Yeah, and
baby.
just like the body's wisdom to not allow this to be an option until things were ready to go is
Yes.
just so incredibly intelligent, even though we may get frustrated by it. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It's just so intelligent to know that, like, hey, this like legit can't be an option because once I turn on,
Yeah,
I'm turning like, systems are a go as long as you keep giving me enough food.
for sure. Yes. Yes.
Oh, well, I love this and I love like just the whole rundown memory lane. And like, yes, like OG from the OG from the OG is, you know what I mean? It's just been such a wild and beautiful ride. And like one thing to say, because Rachel is postpartum, is that like I've been talking to a lot of my postpartum moms now, and it's like it is like the second act of recovery
Yes.
after having a baby, you know what I mean? And just the different challenges. So, we'll definitely have to do a
Yes.
part
I think
two.
that would be, I would love that. And yes, I think that would be fitting.
Yeah, just because there is, I mean, not that I mean, again, the body is like, I'm ready to go as soon as you're ready to go, but there's just so much in motherhood, you know what I mean? That, I think Danny was really open about her struggle to get hers back, postpartum, you know what I mean? And just like so
Yeah.
many people connected with that. And so, like, we're going to have to do a second part, but we just wanted to leave you with an encouragement, everybody with an encouragement that if your hormones are tanked,
Yes.
they will come back online.
Yes.
HA is reversible. And what I actually really love about Rachel's story that we didn't get a chance to get too much into it, and that's okay, is that like she really had to work on, just because everyone else was recovering around 2,500 calories, like that
Yeah.
just was not going to be her story. And so
No.
for her to recover and keep, so you're like, obviously I wasn't there for her whenever she first recovered, but it was that second cycle that didn't come. You know what I mean? And keeping the third one that I ended up getting pregnant was that like she had to eat more.
Yes. And
She
I
had
would
to eat
say,
more.
not as a an unsolicited plug for you guys, of yeah, like I did already have my period, but working with you all, even like it was 2 to 3 months with you, Ashley, and I felt like that was so paramount in me staying the course of getting there. So like I know that I feel like Danny had shared a story one time about how, a girl had like done some stuff and then like got it back, but then was like mad, like was like, you didn't even really help me. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
are you kidding me? Like you guys were this, like, for real, the support of having somebody telling you, kind of like you were saying earlier, with the permission of like, you are doing what you need to do, even though it feels so against the grain of what you have done before and what a lot of messaging is telling you, was just huge. And so yeah, I don't think, I don't know that my son would be here. It wouldn't be this son, if it wasn't for that. So
Well, I love that you were so open about sharing about that. And you're like, we'll have to maybe have a part 3 of what does it look like to be quote unquote the Lone Ranger eating like 3,000 calories. You know what I mean? As like maintenance.
yes. Yeah. Yeah.
When everyone's trying to get by on like 22,
Yes.
and so, I mean, oh gosh, clearly we can't stop talking about, but think about that's like 1,000 calories more on average of what you were doing prior. So like it
Yes.
wasn't just like, oh, I had to eat this much in order to get my cycle back. It's like, oh no, I have to stay here.
Yes. Yes. Well, and I
Which
mean, and I
is
think it
different
required
than
me
other
eating
people's
to
journeys.
like up to almost 2,000 calories more, I think, to really start things.
Oh yeah,
And then,
absolutely.
and then to kind of settle into a place where like, okay, and now I'm at a place where my body is happy enough to cycle and to maintain this for a while. But oh yeah, no, I would,
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
happy to help however, because I love you guys. And if I can, and I mean, going through HA and knowing what the community has brought, I'm like, if I can help in anyone else's story, it would be super cool.
well, thank you so much. We
Thank
love
you.
you, lady, and we're just pumped that you and your son are here.
Oh, I know. Me too.
All right, back. Bye, babe.
Toodaloo.
This episode is brought to you by Grassland Nutrition beef liver capsules. Did you know that in terms of nutrient density, beef liver actually blows vegetables and fruits out of the water? If you're a client of mine, you have already been instructed to eat beef liver either fresh or in capsule form. I recommend it for anyone and everyone who is, of course, dealing with amenorrhea and fertility challenges out there, but I may even recommend it for just everyone in general. Get your husbands on it, get your partners on it. If you have a history of HA and add on top of that maybe a history of the pill, maybe you've been pregnant before, through treatments or other, like your body's been through anything, you're absolutely 100% dealing with a nutrient deficiency of some kind. And while it's true that testing is going to be the best way to understand those exact deficiencies, eating nutrient-dense, real food is going to be one of the most important next steps that you take with or without testing. So I've been using and recommending Grassland Nutrition beef liver capsules for years now. And the capsule form makes it so easy to get your liver in every day. And I appreciate the transparency of this product in particular above others. So in case you're wondering, it's completely natural. This is freeze-dried beef liver in capsules. It's organic, it's made from Australian beef, and my favorite of their products is the liver with kelp because of the iodine from the kelp, which is important for overall thyroid function, which is often low in women with underperforming hormones. So rather than eat seaweed snacks every day, I get to take this beef liver with the kelp for my iodine. So if you're recovering or working on a fertility journey right now, do not skimp the nutrient-rich source of beef liver. Get 10% off your order with the HA Society and support your favorite podcast along the way. They ship to most countries, so you should be covered. Just go to grasslandnutrition.net and use HA Society, just HA Society, at the checkout for the 10% off. That's grasslandnutrition.net with the code HA Society. Thank you so much for listening today, guys. Please subscribe to the podcast, and if you could head to iTunes specifically and leave a rating or review, that would help so much because it makes it easier for other people with HA who are Googling around to find the podcast really easily. So if you do that, you're doing a service to all of the women